Welcome to Common Sense Wellness with Dr. Gary Martin, the show that helps you take control of your health with clarity, confidence, and practical wisdom. Dr. Gary Martin has spent decades in clinical practice and natural wellness research, discovering that the key to lifelong vitality lies in understanding the body's signals before they become symptoms. Each week, we will explore simple science-backed methods like mineral testing, facial scans, and lifestyle adjustments that help you restore balance from the inside out. You'll also hear from expert guests and real clients who have turned their health challenges into stories of transformation. No gimmicks, no fads, just common sense wellness that works. Now, here's your host, Dr. Gary Martin.
Welcome to Common Sense Wellness, another episode. I'm Dr. Gary Martin, and for over 50 years, I've helped people understand their health through testing practical wellness strategies and holistic approaches, primarily by testing urine and saliva, branching out with hair mineral analysis as well. And also we figured out a way how to get inside your mind, because then we call that knowing your memgram, because your body is your mind made visible. So on this show, we explore simple, actionable ways to restore balance, boost energy, and thrive. And today, I'm honored to be joined by Estee Lantos, a certified somatic stress release practitioner, a health coach, and creator of the Bioaligned Method. After more than a decade in corporate leadership at firms like Accenture and KMPG, Estee made a profound pivot. She reversed her own autoimmune condition and complex PTSD by learning how to regulate her nervous system from the inside out. Now, she helps people stuck in survival mode reclaim their vitality, slow their biological aging, and build lasting resilience. Not through more biohacking or trendy protocols, but through a softer, more sustainable path rooted in neuroscience and somatic healing. That was a mouthful. Estee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gary, for having me here. Really excited to dive deeper into all of these exciting topics.
So you spent over a decade in high-pressure corporate roles at Accenture and KMPG before making a dramatic career shift into wellness coaching. What was the moment or the health crisis that made you realize something had to change?
So I used to be deep in biohacking and optimization culture, and I thought I was doing everything right. I've been looking after my health in a way that people should do, like moving, cooking, clean organic foods, really looking after my sleep. But despite all of my efforts, after an intensely stressful time, an autoimmune issue surfaced, which was a little bit of a surprise because, again, I thought of myself as someone who really looks after their health. And so that was the turning point for me to, okay, what was really the missing piece here? And, Gary, I realized that so many of us are trying to optimize our health, yet we are doing it from a place of chronic stress. And so that's really how I went deeper into somatic work and learning a lot more about nervous system regulation and all of these topics that are, I know, very trendy now, but there's a good reason why. And I'm so pleased to see that, more and more people really start to crave that understanding about how their own nervous system works.
All right, so you've described yourself as a recovering biohacker. What were you chasing with biohacking, and what did you discover that it couldn't fix?
So, I like to use the iceberg method here. There are a lot of trendy tools and typically even quick fixes with supplements, trendy protocols that's supposed to help you feel better. But then deeper under the water is your nervous system state, right? And actually, that was the missing piece for me. How do we get back to a safe baseline in my body? And essentially, this is the whole art and science of nervous system work, right? How do we increase our capacity to deal with certain stressors, but then also come back down to a nice regulated baseline, calm state? And we know, of course, from research and science that if someone had more difficult early childhood experiences, that's where it starts, where the nervous system just cannot develop in a way how, compared to someone who didn't have that start early in life. So there is that added element. It's almost like trauma-informed longevity, which I like to call that way, right? Because we need to consider that part, and we need to make sure we pay attention to nervous system first, because if we don't do that, right, if our bodies actually operate from this constant activation and survival mode, then the body is not able to actually pay attention to recovery, rest and repair, all of the parasympathetic states. So when we actually repair and when we actually have a chance to recover.
Yeah, I like what you said about baseline. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been teaching for 50 years regarding testing your urine and saliva is that we have this 10-minute test that anybody can do, and test for 7 things, and we have what's called a healing zone. That's if all 7 of the numbers are down inside the healing zone, then the only reason that it can be in your healing zone is because the body has full and complete access. The brain is connected to every cell in the body by a nerve, but there has to be two-way communication, right? Cell has to talk to the brain, has to be able to talk to the cell. And so if there's no resistance to that, which means you probably don't exhibit any symptoms at all. You're probably just one of these healthy people, running around and, never been on any drugs, never seen a doctor, never whatever. But if you're in this healing zone, it means that the body is in complete control with its innate healing nature. And once you get outside the healing zone, 1 or more of those 7 numbers get outside there, then who knows what can happen, and then now we're talking about, like you said, what has happened in the past, what kind of traumas have you had, whatever, all that begins to now enter in and, and play. So you talk about the body being stuck in a survival state. Can you explain what that actually means physiologically and how people can recognize it in themselves if they are stuck in a survival state?
Yeah, great question. So it's essentially more of a sympathetic dominance, so sympathetic nervous system, which is more known as fight-flight mode. So when we are activated, and so essentially it's stress. We are in a constant state of activation. And here I like to mention that, we hear so many bad things about stress, but I always tell my clients that stress is not good or bad. It's simply an activation, and stress can be very much needed. And this is how we evolve, right? We need stress because it helps us to survive. It helps us to, protect us.
Right.
The problem is when we are never able to actually switch it off. So the problem is when we find ourselves in a situation where we just cannot get out of the stress state. And, very simple things how we realize it is, first thing, sleep, right? Any kind of sleep issues, struggling to fall asleep, restlessness, the typical 3 a.m. wake ups. So that's a very, very clear sign. But we also know the gut-brain connection, right? Like it's very typical that when we have some more acutely stressful times, we can immediately feel something, digestion and gut health. And I know there are a lot of like great tests as well, which I've been doing in my biohacking era, a lot of different kind of tests. But there's also the other factors, right? How do we feel in our relationships? Like the more irritation, we feel like we just don't have that tolerance. We just can't really find those good relation dynamics around us. So there's a bunch of different categories, both how we feel, relationally, but also like we can feel in our basic health routines that something is just off here. And people usually know this cognitively, right? That okay, this is stressful. But I also like to emphasize that this is not just in our heads, right? Just as you beautifully said right in the beginning, head and the body, like we are interconnected. So I don't really like, that separation of, the mind and body. I really think, as you said, it's a two-way street always, and the body and the brain always communicates with each other. So also, how do we notice what our body is really going through? Because cognitively, we may know that something is stressful, but do we actually have that awareness of what it actually feels like in our bodies, not in our thoughts and in our head, but actually arriving back into the body and noticing that internal landscape.
Yeah, doing over 50 years I've been I've done thousands of these urine and saliva tests, and one of the things that's always amazed me is that how often people aren't, like you said, some people are just not aware. Some people have lived so long in a particular state that they think it's normal. They don't understand. And one of the numbers in the urine and saliva test that we do is what we call the stress number. And that stress number needs to be balanced with what we call the metabolism efficiency number, how well you're converting food into energy. If the stress number is higher, no matter what the person says about their lifestyle, they are under severe stress. And stress is probably the reason behind the body chemistry. And if people can't learn how to address that, then of course they're in big trouble. So you reversed your own autoimmune condition by addressing trauma and nervous system regulation. Walk us through what that journey looked like. What did you actually have to start doing differently?
Yeah. So let me start that this is where my biohacking history is very handy, because I do not actually believe that there is one playbook that's good for everybody, because we are so different. And this is why testing, right, what you said, understanding your own biology with all the different tests available is so important, because then you can have a snapshot of what is going on in your own body. So I really had to figure out what moves the needle for me. And it's never one thing usually, it's really a complex set of tools that I applied. But I realized that somatic work, so finding some sort of therapeutic tool that actually works with the body, is going to be essential for me. Hence, later, I also trained as a somatic practitioner because it was so genuinely helpful in my case. But other than that, I also did a lot of the other, lifestyle pillars. So gut healing was a very important factor. As we know, with any autoimmune disease, usually there is a compromised gut health there. And so I paid a lot of attention to, take out triggers first, give some time for my gut to heal, leaky gut and all of that stuff that stress actually impacts immediately. So that was a really important part of my journey as well, on top of the nervous system and somatic healing. And then keep doing all the stuff that I was doing before as well. So paying attention to my sleep hygiene, heart rate variability tracking, which is one of my favorite metrics since we talk about testing. And one of the good things that, with the wearables now, we can really easily track how our trends shape. And it's never really, one point in time that we care about. It's more like understanding our own trends, right? Our own triggers. So I
Right.
went really deep down into understanding my HRV, which is ultimately, how balanced is my nervous system and what are the triggers? What are those moments? Whether, that's alcohol, whether that's having to do a very difficult presentation or something other stressful coming up in my life, I could already see and track those drops in my HRV, but also I could see what lifts it up. And so I started doing more strategically, more of the things that actually helped my HRV to rise. So it's really a nice complex process. But again, I just want to highlight for the listeners that I just encourage everybody to really pay attention to their own bodies and their own history, their own context, right? We all have slightly different genetic makeup as well. So the more we can understand about us, the better we can create that roadmap to healing. And of course, there are some best practices that we also talk about here, but it's never really like, copy paste from one person to the other, but really developing that awareness around our own bodies inside out. And also the patterns, what you mentioned about so many of us, we don't even realize we've been operating from, chronic people pleasing, phoning response, right? Where everybody else around us is more important than our own needs. And Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this framework as well, right? Where we have this autoimmune personality. So that's an interesting topic as well. But so that's also part of healing. So it's really a beautiful, complex process to go through. And I think we can find joy actually in this process of exploring, right?
Right.
What
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I'm always amazed is that when in the urine and saliva testing that we do is that the closer that people get to what we call the healing zone, the more joy appears. The more peace, the more happiness, the more it's been so suppressed for so many people. They have no idea how they've suppressed it. Financial stress, relationship stress, blah, blah, blah. All right. So your bioaligned method integrates polyvagal therapy, attention and trauma releasing exercises, and neuroscience. So for someone who has never heard of these terms, what is a somatic healing tool and why does it work when willpower and positive thinking don't work?
Yeah, yeah. So anything somatic means we start with the body. So instead of cognitively, probably most listeners are familiar with all the traditional therapy tools, right? When we talk about our problems, trying to make sense of our history. So we really are up in our heads. No, somatic methods are flipping this and they start from the body. So they go directly to the body as opposed to, trying to create a narrative or talking about things. We go to the body. And so why this is important? Because many of these patterns developed really early when our brain was not fully switched on that way, right? So our bodies, our nervous system remembers this pattern in our bodies. Hence, it's really important when we want to shift something, we should use this bottom up. So they also call it bottom up from body to brain. And then when we talk about brain to body, that's more like a top down approach. So in my method, I combine both bottom up, so somatic healing, such as TRE, which is the stress, tension, and trauma release exercises. But we also combine it with the top-down tools, right? So making sense of our history and all of the great tools that are available from a cognitive perspective. And then the third part, which is where probably, our work connect with you, is the terrain, right? Or biology. Understand that as we do this top-down and bottom-up work, how do we help our bodies to get all the resources and all the support that the body needs to get into what you call the healing zone. And that's where all of those lifestyle pillars are coming into picture, such as, sleeping, the stress transformation, nutrition, and exercising, all of these good tools that are traditionally in our health optimization toolkit.
All right. So you've you've said that you can't biohack your way out of dysregulation from the outside in. What does nervous system first health optimization actually look like in daily practice?
Mm-hmm. So in a very simple term, what we want to create here is safety in our body first. So we want to have a felt sense of safety in our bodies. Now, what does it look like in practice? I can tell you my example, what it looks like for me.
Okay.
And again, there are really great tools out there which works for everybody else. So it comes with the regular health habits, right? The sleep hygiene, making sure that I get the right nourishment for my nervous system. So, I have some great building blocks so I can stay more regulated, which an example, right? I really like to have nice savory breakfast with protein on my plate because that will help my blood glucose, that will help me stay stable the whole day. So there is that whole nuance around how we support the body through these everyday practices. And then there is also those micro breaks when I feel that, my system is getting just triggered, bringing more spaciousness into my day. That's become really important for me. And that can even be, 10 minutes just away from the screens or a nice walk in nature. Nature is very regulating, right? Being out in sunshine, that just immediately a safety signal for my own body. But so essentially, it's about being in tune what is going on in my body as opposed to overriding it. So that was the biggest kind of mindset shift as well. Start to really pay attention and listen to the signals and needs of the body as opposed to cognitively, okay, I'm just going to do whatever I decided to do and work from the head only.
All right. So there is growing, well, something you said a little bit ago just flashed something in my head. You were talking about the importance of the gut. And of course, pH, urine pH and saliva pH have a lot to do with the digestive tract, whatever. And what I have found is that the farther apart they are, let's say the urine pH is 5.2 and the saliva pH is 7.4, that's what is that, 22 points apart. Okay. The farther apart they are, the more stressed that the person is. And the closer together they are, the more non-stressed they are. And so one way that we can tell whether digestive stress is how much it's playing a role in screwing things up, basically, is what are your urine pH and your saliva pH at any given point? And they both have to always be taken together at the same time. And so it's interesting that, we both talk we both talk about the same things. Our language is different.
Yeah.
You're coming at it from a somatic point of view. I'm coming at it from a biochemistry point of view. But there's growing conversation about the autoimmune. Oh, autoimmune's everywhere, right? Autoimmune personality. The idea that certain emotional patterns or trauma histories may predispose people to autoimmune conditions. What have you observed in your clients, and what are your steps toward dealing with that issue?
Yeah. So I observed it almost all my clients who struggle with some autoimmune condition. And I'm also myself, I used to be a textbook example of this framework. So, I really can speak also from experience. And I really like how Dr. Gabor Mate actually created a framework around this. I actually attended one of his lectures in London last year. And so basically, he talks about these four categories, like, first of all, feeling responsible for everybody else's emotions around us. Then also suppressing our own emotions, especially difficult emotions such as anger. And suppressing anger is a huge topic I see across the board, and also how healing it can be when we can healthily express and feel our anger. Because again, just as stress is not bad or good, anger is not bad or good. In fact, it's rather good to feel that, because it's a boundary violation, right? When we feel angry, that means someone actually tried to violate our boundaries. And then there is also the third category around how we are defining our self-worth through responsibility. So feeling highly responsible, and often or sometimes at the cost of our own health. And so the fourth one is just overall prioritizing everybody else's needs other than our own. And I could see this also in my leadership team as part of, my corporate career. And back to something you said earlier, it's also so normalized that we're living with chronic disease, and relatively young people, right? People in their 20s, 30s. It's normal that they have chronic diseases across the board. And I don't think that should be normalized. So I think that's also showing us that, there's so many things in today's world that we just accepted that, okay, it is what it is. We have to live with it. So, and of course, this is a bigger conversation, right? All of the factors that are influencing it. But yeah, so it's not a surprise that we see the increase of all of the various chronic diseases, and even younger and younger people facing it. So I really feel called to bring some awareness and trying to, shift this, at least with certain factors, I can help here. But it's definitely going back to how do we actually really look after ourselves and heal those patterns that are not actually healthy and not helping us in the long term either.
Yeah, the past is a huge player. Most people don't realize that there is a pattern. There's a pattern to your past. One of the aspects of this urine and saliva test is that it helps us understand what the plan against your life is. Which is kind of like approaching it from the bottom up. The plan again, everybody talks. There's a lot of talk about the plan for your life, and there's a plan for your life. Well, you can't have a plan for your life if you don't have one against it. It's just, this is a physical dimension. The physical dimension. This is the dimension of dichotomies. Right? Male, female, hot, cold, blah, blah. The only reason we know what temperature is or means is because we have hot over here and we have cold over there. So you got to have this dichotomy going on. So if there's a plan for your life, then you darn well better know that there's one against it. But nobody talks about that. Nobody teaches that. Nobody, and we can identify that to help a person understand how they've what I would call take the bait. They've taken the bait for 20 years. I have this 26-year-old that works for me. He's a chronic disease mess. And I'm looking at him, and I'll be 82 this year. And so it's like, I got like 60 years on this kid. And I didn't even have a doctor until I went on Medicare at 65. Right. So here's this kid, 26 years old. And he's like, he's misses days. He has to have mental health days. And mental health day, what the heck is that? Give me a break. So, yeah. So I understand where you're coming from on that. So you've been featured discussing biological age reversal. So how does nervous system regulation connect to slowing or even reversing so biological aging and inflammation? Obviously, biological aging and inflammation are deeply connected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's how we define what aging is, right? There are different definitions to aging, but one thing which we could argue it means is accumulated and unrepaired damage.
Oh,
That
that's good. That's good.
And if we take this logic, right, this is why it's so important we tap into these parasympathetic states when the body can actually repair and recover. That's when we rest and digest. So that's where the healing happens. And so it's no surprise if we are constantly in survival mode and we are not able to effectively bring those recovery states to our everydays. That's very simple to see how that could impact our biological age and that pace of aging as well.
Right. So one of the principles that we talk a lot about on our show is make truth your authority. Do not make authority your truth. In your field, what conventional health wisdom do you think people most need to question?
I would say something that we talked about already is the quick fixes. I think we really like to have a pill for things and we really like to have fast results. And we feel a bit discouraged when it's not happening that quickly. And I just like to say that nervous system regulation lifestyle is more about slow, soft, consistent steps rather than, one breakthrough. Because also some of those patterns we talked about, sometimes for, decades, long years are with us and shaped us. So give ourselves the grace how we undo some of those patterns or shift them. And so again, it's more about that consistency rather than intensity and consistent, positive, reinforcing steps into the right direction matter so much more than some of those, very nice quick fix solutions or the promise of those quick fix solutions.
Yeah, I don't know about Europe, but here there have never been more. I mean, if you're watching the news, you get news for about 5 minutes, and then you get 5 minutes of, it's this drug company is advertising this, fix this, take this drug, and whatever. Of course, never mind that it might kill you. But anyway, take this drug, take it. And then doctors that are promoting dietary supplements over here, I know we have a lot wider open access to supplements than you do there. But it's never been quick fixes, just never been. Every time you turn around, there's just a quick fix, quick fix. Never there's any talk about, well, why do you think this way? How did you get this way? What happened to you? What was your childhood like? Blah, blah, blah. No, quick fix. Take this pill, drink this potion, right? So with all your success, Steve, what do you consider your biggest challenge right now?
The biggest challenge is really understanding that even myself, how easy it is to slip back to these old patterns if I'm not conscious enough. And sometimes, I could almost like beat myself up. I've done so much work already, I've been in this space. Yet, if something a bit more triggering or a more difficult life situation comes, I can notice that it's still a challenge to come back to those beautiful regulated states. But then again, I remind myself that this is exactly what I teach, to give ourselves the grace and do continue doing those small, consistent steps into the right direction matters more.
All right. So where can our audience go to learn more about you and the Bioaligned Method? What's the best way to learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as Holistic Estee is my handle. And I'm also posting on LinkedIn. That's more for corporate audiences and how we actually redefine ways of working, which supports our health as opposed to goes against it actively. And also my website is esteelantos.com.
All right. Thank you very much. So if you could leave our listeners with one takeaway about reclaiming their health from the inside out, what would it be?
I would say create safety so biology can repair itself.
Oh, very good. Very good. Yeah, see, I would look at that as, safety to me is, I boil everything down to numbers. I want to see a number. I want to see like, you come in, you're all stressed out and whatever, but I want to see what your number is. So, I've got to do this urine and saliva test, to come up with that number, right? And so safety to me would be metabolism efficiency above 80%. If you're converting food into energy greater than 80%, then you are beginning to enter what we call the safety zone. So you can't manage what you don't measure. That's my little saying, right? You can't manage what you got to be able to measure it. Otherwise, it's based on feeling. It's based on some subjective type. And sometimes the subjective, as you know, can lead a person, astray. You can miss things, especially if, like we talked earlier, you're so accustomed to living in this chaos, in this crisis state. All right. So what does thriving look like to you? I told you how I see it as a number, but how does thriving look like to you?
Yeah, if we talk about data, like I like my HRV number to be very nice and high. That means that my body is thriving. But other than the data points, I think we touched on it, is joy and connection. So when we are in those beautiful parasympathetic states, life just better, right? We can connect more deeply with other human beings. We feel a natural sense of joy, and we have more creativity. We feel more closer to ourselves. So I think that's really thriving for me.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Estee. It was very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to finding out more about your work and how you do it. So, all
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us on Common Sense Wellness. Remember, taking practical steps to understand your health emotionally and physically is how we restore balance, boost energy, and thrive. See you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Common Sense Wellness with Dr. Gary Martin. To learn more about the testing and resources we discussed, or to find out how you can take charge of your own health, visit BIRI.org. You'll find valuable information, free tools, and ways to connect directly with our wellness community. That's BIRI.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share the show with someone who's ready to take their next step toward better health.